house where we live in for 18 years now, have received our 2 boys and only a few Eingeweihte know that we now have 2 pugs for the next 14 years. So thanks to it. The very start of the causality chain while we are meeting here is Jeannie Fiebig. I haven't spoken an English word with her for 20 years, and it happened in a church situation. Jeannie plays the organ for 27 years, and she spoke me and said, "You do this opera thing, I know one of those." And it took a while until it clicked, but then it fired within the next 15 minutes, and that was in August. The next step was I got in contact with Dad, Hancock, over the email, and then with James in London we emailed, and it was a secret that he would come to Melbourne because Mum then had a birthday, and that all happened within the little framework of the Hancocks and James, because you must know that Jeannie is James's primary school teacher, so this is a relationship of 1971, and at the next occasion I'll show you the pictures. Slideshow. Yes, and you understand, I myself together with Horst, we have missed a beat. We're sponsoring since 91 and haven't missed a final audition in those years, have we ever, Horst? And of course we were with James in 95 and with everybody else. And I took over the office from Andy Faber-Castell, and there were only 3 in this office. It was the former boss of Karin Pentila, Mr. Heidel, when it started in 88, then it was Andy, and then it was myself. And that awoke me from the passivity of just sponsoring. I was rather interested in getting to know the former winners. I telephoned Cologne, I met them wherever they lived in Australia, emailed and so on, but James was missing in the collection. So I was immediately on the email, and I was so satisfied when the vision of meeting here tonight in a little circle grew, and enabling me to welcome you, and particularly the sponsors, to thank for their long-term support. And it is indeed so that we have 8 of us, of the sponsoring crowd amongst us, and it is so important because the singing industry is not like your other industries, real estate, banking, cars, chemicals. That is sort of constant cash flow. But singing is erratic, and it needs the other industry to join in from a cash flow point of view. And that's why you have to experience what they're doing, and I would truly say that had the German Operatic Award not allowed James to leave the island, the Australian island, he would potentially be still in Australia, but he's not. He's currently not in Germany, but he's in Britain, which is not far away. That things are on the move. The new winner has been found on the 14th of September. It's Samantha Rubenhold. You will see her on the website. She lives in Adelaide, and there might be a little surprise in the pipeline to hear her, but I don't want to promise it so far. James himself, a Helden tenor. I was asked what that means. Hero is the head. It's a wonderful description for power and strength. Will lead us into prehistoric times and will convey to us mysteria. It's what we don't have in the motor industry and in banking. Sure don't. And David, and this is important to say, not that you think he's just a piano player tonight, he is truly in charge of the cradle and the nursery for young singers. He's head of opera of the Victorian College of the Arts, and I don't want to call it a school or a kindergarten. It is where the young singers are brought to the stage, where they then enter these final auditions that Horst and I go regularly to send them overseas and so on. I will distribute the program and a description of James and Professor Kram to you. Also, it's still in draft form, the little commercial for the next event. So do a bit of Russian with the paper, and I hand over to David to say the next word.
Harlem, that's all right. Show London fever. I will speak English. I may lapse into German because I tend to get really excited about Wagner, and especially as we go through this program, because James and I decided to perform Wagner. Why? Well, not only is he, in my opinion and our opinion, the greatest opera, I hesitate to call it opera, let's call it theatre in music composer, but he is too rarely performed in Australia, much too rarely. One of the reasons is there are not many singers in Australia, born in Australia, bred in Australia, educated in Australia, who can actually do justice to the music. Let me just say a few words before we begin about what is Heldentenor. Heroic tenor, where does that term come from? There is a music encyclopedia, a sort of, if you know the English version of a music and opera encyclopedia, it's Cobbe's opera book. It has all the stories of the operas and explanations about the composers. The German equivalent is called Kloiber, K-L-O-I-B-E-R. And at the beginning of each opera, Kloiber, and it was just published quite a number of years ago, put the description as he thought it of each voice type of each opera. And then he categorized them, like there was lyrische Sopran, lyric sopran, dramatisch Koloratur Sopran, dramatic Koloratur Sopran, etc. And then there was Jugendlich Heldentenor, that was a youthful heroic tenor, to doing the parts, for example, like the young knights, Lohengrin, Walter von Stolzing, etc. And then there was dramatische Heldentenor, dramatic heroic tenor, doing the very big parts. And it wasn't just Wagner, it was also, for example, Othello by Verdi. Now, Kloiber never realized that this would actually become entrenched in law, because when you were engaged as a singer in Germany, up until a certain time, they actually could make you sing anything. And if you look at the annals of the 19th century, you find that somebody would be doing Bellini one moment, Fidelio the next, and quite dramatic Wagner the next. The theatres, I don't know whether it was the agents, the singers, or the theatres, but anyway, after a time, they decided to divide the actual roles you could actually sing, legally speaking, into what they call Fächer, or pigeonholes. And so you were designated, when you were engaged by a theatre, as belonging to a certain Fach. And this Fach was then determined by what Kloiber thought the Fächer were. This is coming to a certain degree of contention now, because some of the things he thought should be sung by a particular sort of singer are actually not sung by that particular sort of singer in Italy, for example, or in other countries. But the Fach system still survives, and a singer can actually refuse to perform a role in a German theatre if they say that it is not in their particular Fach. So here we go. James studied as a baritone in Australia, and then at considerable expense to himself and very considerable sacrifices, retrained his voice to become this very rare breed of Heldentenor. So we're going to give you a recital. Now, remember, Heldentenöre are accustomed to singing with a 120-piece orchestra with a 2,400 seat theatre. But we're going to tone it down. And as it's spring, we thought we would start with a spring song, all about young love, young growth, happiness, succeeding to the unhappily married, in fact, is the actual story. Don't bother to read it now. You can read it up later when there's a better light. Just enjoy a young man singing of love and freshness and green and spring. Winterstürme bitten den Monomost. Ladies and gentlemen, if it appears that I'm talking at length, there are two reasons. Firstly, I'm hard to shut up once I get going. Because the next excerpt is from what I think must be the most world-changing opera that has ever been written. That is Tristan und Isolde. It was written in the middle, bang in the middle of the 19th century, and for a number of reasons, especially musical reasons, changed the way other composers wrote operas. And one of the reasons was that it started to veer away from the normal key changes, you know, of Mozart and Haydn and Beethoven, of major and minor and modulation to keys in a very logical fashion. And through the device called chromaticism, it started looking at the keys between the keys and what happens if you almost get to another key, but just before you get into it, you start to veer away from it. So it's sort of like going, rather than going on in Melbourne, where everything's really clear, and you turn right and then left, and you know where you're going. Imagine you're going, no, I'm not going to talk about Sydney. I'm going to talk about going on an ocean voyage where you know where you're going, but the winds and the nature and everything will make you veer here and there, and you sort of get lost on the way. In fact, in Jungian terms, they often call it the night sea voyage. The reason I mention the night sea voyage is that a lot of Tristan and Isolde is not just about two people falling in love in a forbidden way because she is supposed to be married and etc., etc. It's about when you drill down to the deepest level of your psyche, you actually come across the black shadow of life itself. And often people who are in that very ecstatic phase, they engage in suicide pacts. It happens all the time. Ecstasy, you begin to question what other people think about life. And Wagner symbolized this through night and day. He said that the day is what people think rationally, but actually the true meaning of life is in the night. Tristan and Isolde have this amazing love affair and pledge death to each other, basically. They are discovered. Tristan allows himself to be mortally wounded, and his faithful servant Courbenas takes Tristan away to a lonely spot which used to be the ancestral home of Tristan. And he hopes that there, among these familiar surroundings, even though they're now, again, symbolically speaking, in ruins and very desolate, he will heal. But Tristan doesn't want to heal. And he goes into a sort of a comatose near-death situation. And with the excerpt we're going to hear is when he comes out of this, and he's still half conscious, half in the dream world, half in this fantasy world of cosmic nothingness and cosmic togetherness with Isolde. So please hear Duckt dich das from the third act, Tristan und Isolde.
das Song.
Wann wird es Ruhe im Haus? When will peace reign, you might say, in our house, meaning in our, also not just in our house literally, but in our minds, in our souls, is very indicative of Wagner. He was a very restless person and lived in many different places, and by all accounts he was extremely nervy, but in a very good sense as well. Not just in the normal sense. If you have you ever heard of Das Braune Buch, the Brown Book? Yeah. It was a diary which was actually written for his great love of his life, Cosima von Bülow. And most of that diary was written when he was in love with her, but she was married to Hans von Bülow. So it's a very personal diary, and it's called Das Braune Buch because she actually had it bound in brown and with a beautiful brass clasp, etc. But it has actually been published, and if you're interested in Wagnerian literature, etc., it's a very personal insight. And I remember one of the sections that he loved nature as well, of course. He loved walking in the mountains, and he went up to the top of this mountain and looked down at the precipice, and for one moment he was seriously thinking of jumping off. He had no money, he was in exile, he loved this woman, just like Tristan and Isolde loves Isolde, but she's away, she's not coming, but is she coming, etc. So Wagner poured his personal life, of course, into his art. It's very hard to separate the two. All the excerpts we've been hearing so far about love, of course, but what sort of love? Siegmund loves Sieglinde. The problem is, A, she's married to somebody else, and B, they are brother and sister. Tristan loves Isolde. The problem is, she is also married to somebody else. Love creates immense problems, and Wagner was always engaged in that debate, which is more important, love, the expression of love, the manifestation of love, or the rules and regulations of society which sort of mould love into prescribed forms. And towards the end of his life, of course, with Parsifal, which was his last opera, again the subject of love versus morality comes into play, because the knight who is responsible for guarding the most sacred relics of Christendom, the Holy Grail, which was the cup in this particular version which caught the drops of blood during the Passion, and the spear which the Roman centurion allegedly thrust into the side of Christ. These are kept under the guardianship of a select band of mystical knights, whose leader had to obey a vow of chastity. And Amfortas was beguiled into the paganism of erotic love and succumbed, and as a punishment, also like Tristan, a wound which never heals. And Amfortas' problem is the wound never heals, and also it impedes him from carrying out the guilt, occasional like this as well, from carrying out the sacred duty, if you might say, the communion, the sacred communion. And it takes a legendary character, der reine Tor, durch Mitleid wissend, through pity or through empathy is a better word, made knowledgeable the pure simpleton, Parsifal, who wanders into this realm of the nights, doesn't understand anything, but through almost a reenactment of the Amphotos situation in the magic garden of Eros, but refuses to succumb to Eros because he realizes what happened to Amphotos, and he actually physically as well as emotionally feels that pain. And then comes the pilgrimage back, where he then is able to carry on that task. On a lighter note, I was involved in many different productions with Parsifal, and one of my journeyings through the world was as Erster Kapellmeister in Mannheim, which is a wonderful theatre. It's a horrible theatre, it looks like an airport, but the artistic product is fantastic. The orchestra is just incredible, and the singers are fantastic. Half the orchestra goes to play in Bayreuth each year, and half the singers. And at that point when I was there, the resident bass was Franz Mazzura, who's an Austrian and has been to Bayreuth every single year for donkeys years. And he normally sings Klingsor, which is the baddie, the magic magician who takes Amphotos in the magic garden in Bayreuth. But in Mannheim he sang everything. He sang everything from the one line Aurora the Bonze in Madame Butterfly to Wotan, and everything in between. And that is typical of a big German repertory house. It's not a star system. You sing, the small roles are just as important as the big roles. But he played the lead role of Gurdamans. And there is a line which I can't remember exactly, but it's like, Wer steht vor mir durch Jammer und Gram so tief gebeugt? Something like that. Who stands before me, he says, through grief and anguish, so bowed down, see? And my colleague, there were two Erstekapellmeisters, so we had 35 operas in the repertoire, you know, all the Strauss, all the big bands, all the Wagner, etc., and they all had to be covered. And my colleague was Thilo Fuchs, and I'm David Kram. So he used to actually sing a performance, Wer steht vor mir durch Fuchs und Kram. Finished in the canteen. And I even remember that anecdote when I visited Bayreuth in 92 or 93 and met France again by that time. Almost really retired, but he never forgot that. He was a real wag. Sorry, I've ruined the atmosphere. Solemn moment when Parsifal comes back with the Holy Spear and touches Amphotos, who has been on death's door against suicidal, you know, and everything is made whole again. But the music is just amazing. we backtrack now in the chronology of Wagner's output to Siegfried, which happens to be actually my favourite Wagner opera. I'm probably a bit of a maverick in the opera world. I always have slightly different opinions to most of the mainstream, and most of the favourites of the Ring tetralogy is Die Walküre. And I'm not denigrating Die Walküre, but as a conductor, Siegfried is so, because the first act is just like a symphony. The themes, the interweaving of the themes is just brilliant. It's like Mozart, it's like Haydn. It's such a pleasure. And in fact, I have conducted Siegfried and other operas. The last time I conducted was in Nantes, in France, in a very interesting production. I've got a video of it actually. It's quite a long opera, so and it's not so much.
The first act is longer than most other operas you go
But it's not. It's actually with Wagner as a conductor. You get to the end and you think, fantastic! You're so hyped up. You think, let's do it all over again. But in order to do that, you see, in Nantes is the most beautiful 18th century building. So I used to take off my tailcoat, put my big long overcoat over things, and nick out the stage door and go down. And next door was Burger King. So I had a huge double hamburger and a large Coke and put it on my coat and go back, and that's what kept me going. Anyway, I suppose this is on a lighter note because Siegfried is a very funny opera as well, and it has some of Wagner's most light-hearted and also his most enchanting things, because it's all about a young person, a young devil-may-care teenager, actually, Siegfried. The excerpt we're going to do first is actually from the middle of the opera, the second act, where Siegfried, who has been brought up by this horrible old sort of Fagin-like character, as a foster father deep in the wood, can't stand it, but it's a sort of love-hate, interdependent relationship. And finally, Siegfried manages to get rid of him for a moment and sits down in his beloved woodland that he knows every twig and every leaf and every ladybird, and just immerses him in nature, just as you might say Tristan and Isolde. You immerse yourself in the oceanic feeling of ecstatic love. So here you immerse yourself in the spring and the night filtering through, and then this opens Siegfried's thoughts up. Now they start to just go from one thought to the other, and he comes back. Who am I really? You know, that dwarf can't be my father. Who am I? Who are my father and my mother? And he starts, and it becomes so tender, because Wagner himself was not sure who his father was. He was absolutely not sure. He adored his mother. But that identity crisis actually runs through a lot of the Wagner's works. Don't worry about identity crisis, so just think of this beautiful woodland and the summer and Siegfried indulging in these very gentle and sentimental.
Supposed to be gentle, I think. But it's supposed to be forest tonight. They're all trees.
Does it help you?
There's one little bit, by the way, where Siegfried has to, he decides, he hears a bird sing. He says, I might just see if I can talk the bird language. So he cuts a little bit of a pipe from sort of flute, and it doesn't work quite well. So if you hear some rather strange noises coming from this end, it's supposed to be this little homemade flute.
so froh. Und es gefällt mir frische Wald, und es lockt mir lustig an, weil Garstiger von mir schied, und ich kann nicht ihn wiedersehen. Von Liebe, mein Sohn, nicht wenn ich ganz, Liebe beleidigt, gerade so darf ich, riesig und genau, klein und krumm, hängen nicht, mit hängenden Ohren, trieben Augen, verloren, ich mag ihn nicht mehr sehen. Gar nicht mehr denken, in den letzten Gewiss, ihre Schimmelaugen, nur noch wie Haben Sie mich geboren? Warum? Aber starb sie da? Sterben die Menschenmütter an ihren Söhnen, alle dahin. Traurig wäre das Traum. Ach, möcht ich so meiner Mutter was mir erzählt, es wäre gleich spannend gut zu verstehen. Dazu könnte man kommen, wie das wohl möglich war. Hey, ich versuch's, singen noch den romischen Englisch, und wenn ich der Worte ab der Weile, sing ich so sein Sprache, versteh ich wohl auch, was er spricht. Und los, so schwarz ich denn bloß? Auf den Boden droht die bondige Weise mir nicht. Allein, mich steht, ich bleibe du, von dir lernt sich die Schleim.
Very unusual.
Can I just ask David what Bach he belongs in?
Sorry?
What Bach do you belong in?
Me?
Yes.
Fiction of falsetto. Oh, yes. The first act of Siegfried, of course, is the exposition. We see the poor wretched dwarf Mime vainly trying to reforge magic sword Nordpunk. Even though he was regarded in legend as the master smith, we see him vainly trying to teach Siegfried how it's done. Again, Wagner's cocking a snook in the sense of the undue dependence on rules and regulations, and the way it was always done before has to be the way it always has to be done. And we have the Naturkind Siegfried, who's much more at home with the wild beasts of the forest than he is with this sort of so-called civilization. And it ends with a song, actually. I mean, a lot of Siegfried is actually based on songs rather than on this symphonic sort of ongoing musical dialogue. And it's so characteristic as our work. But it ends with a song. The song happens to last almost half an hour. We're only going to perform a short excerpt from it. It's the shadily, the smithy of the song where Siegfried decides to do his own version. George, he actually completely deconstructs the sword. He files it all into little sort of fragments and then casts it completely anew. But the main thing is from the tenor's point of view is that the tenor has to learn not only the words of the song, not only the music of the song, but also how to bang a hammer in time with the conductor at the same time. And the Siegfried that I did it with in France had the hammering down pat, but could he remember what verse came next? So he had the words pasted on the tree trunk, pasted on the anvil, pasted on the thing, pasted on the sword, and everywhere. And everywhere he went, he'd be looking like this, and he would justify which damn verse was next. So I always love the name of this song. It's Notton, you know, I suppose it's being translated as needful. Really, Not doesn't just mean need, it doesn't mean a lack of something, it means also a crisis or a dilemma. So it means the sword that can get you out of a sticky situation. Okay, let's do Notton, Nein, das Schwert.
I want to thank Henkell for organising this tonight. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you for coming tonight. It's been a real pleasure to see you all.
And it's unbelievable. We all got probably 10 meters or 5 centimeters or 70 meters closer to Wagner. When I was in Sydney during the final auditions, I asked my predecessor in the office, Andy Faber, we studied in Switzerland, very close friends, how much do you actually like opera? And he pulled me aside and I quite like it, but I can't have those Wagner operas, the long ones. And you know, of course, where we are coming from, where this is said, and you all have it in the back of my mind, and I see my mother in summer holidays as 14-year-olds when she prepared for Bayreuth, and for a whole week she went party tour and tape recorder, and it was so heavy and so unbelievable. I had that conversation with my son Carl, who was really far away, but we got closer tonight. It's a lifelong learning process, and it is an acquired taste in the true sense of the word. It's like you start with white wine, you go to red wine, you acquire the taste for it. You start with Henkel and tonight you are having Henkel Brut because the Henkel is too sweet. And that's along those lines. And thank you very, very much, James. And it is lovely that through Jeannie our paths crossed, and I was able to fill this office, which is really fundraising for German Operatic Award, with this wonderful